The silent stranger at Terminal 5. It was past midnight at Los Angeles International Airport, and most of the world had gone quiet. The loudspeakers had stopped announcing flights. The baggage belts had slowed to a crawl, and the crowd had thinned, down to a few scattered travelers trying to keep their eyes open. But near Gate 42, a young woman sat alone on a cracked leather bench, arms folded tightly, eyes darting from her phone screen to the sliding glass doors every few seconds. Her name was Emily, a 26-year-old nurse who had just returned from a last-minute trip to see her sick mother in Seattle. Her flight had been delayed twice, and by the time she landed, her phone battery had died. Her cousin, who was supposed to pick her up, hadn't shown. There were no taxis left outside, and the rideshare apps were taking forever to load on the airport's weak Wi-Fi. Her hands trembled from exhaustion, hunger, and anxiety. Tears welled up, but she forced them back down. She didn't notice him at first, not until he sat 2 benches away from her, dressed in black jeans, a worn jacket, and a simple beanie. He had a quiet presence, like someone who had learned how to be invisible without trying. He wasn't looking at a phone, wasn't even fidgeting. He was just ... there, still, patient, like he was waiting for something or someone too. Emily tried not to stare, but there was something oddly familiar about him. His beard was slightly unshaven, and his eyes carried a kind of still sadness that felt both heavy and kind. When he finally turned his head slightly and caught her glance, he offered a small smile. It's not the kind that people force in awkward places. It was warm, understanding, human. You okay? His voice was soft, calm, almost whisper-like, as if he didn't want to disturb the quiet. Emily hesitated, unsure. She looked around. Not really," she said, her voice low. "My phone's dead, and I think my ride forgot me." The man nodded slowly. "I know that feeling," he said. "Waiting and wondering if anyone's coming?" Emily let out a shaky breath and offered a nervous smile. "Yeah, it's not fun." "No," he said gently. "It's not." They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the ceiling lights filling the space between them. Emily looked down at her hands, then glanced up again. "Do you work here?" she asked cautiously. He chuckled softly. "No, just passing through." "You waiting for someone?" He paused. His answer came slower this time. Not anymore. Plans changed. She wanted to ask more, but something about his tone stopped her. It wasn't sadness that demanded attention. It was more like acceptance. A quiet ache that had made peace with disappointment. After a few minutes, he stood up and walked toward the vending machine nearby. Without saying a word, he returned with a bottle of water and a small pack of crackers. He offered them to her. Without a fuss. "You looked like you needed something," he said. Emily blinked, a little stunned. "Thank you," she said softly, taking the items. "You didn't have to. I know," he replied. "That's why it matters." That line stayed with her, more than the food, more than the comfort. It was the way he said it, like he believed. Every word. Emily leaned back against the cold bench, letting the water ease her dry throat. "You're very kind," she said. "What's your name?" He looked at her with a familiar smile now. "Keanu." Her eyes widened slightly. Disbelief, but in a strange recognition. She looked again, more closely this time. The beard, the eyes, the quiet grace. The name, double quotes. Wait. Keanu. Like ... Keanu Reeves. He nodded gently, not proudly, just truthfully. "Yeah, but just Keanu tonight." She blinked several times, trying to process the moment. "What are you doing here, I mean? Alone, like this?" He looked around the empty terminal, then back at her. "Sometimes, I just like to be here." Airports are places where people wait, where people say goodbye or start again. It's a good place to think. Emily sat in awe. It's not because of the fame, but because of how different he was from what she expected. There was no entourage, no flash, just a man quietly waiting with someone who had no idea how much she needed company that night. When she tried to hand him some of the crackers back, he shook his head. "I already ate," he said with a grin. "Twice," she smiled back. Was the first real smile she'd had in hours. As the night wore on, they talked quietly. Not about movies or fame, but about life. About being tired. About family. About moments when everything feels uncertain. Emily shared how her mother's illness had scared her. How helpless she had felt. Flying back and forth, not knowing if she would make it in time. Keanu listened. Really listened. Without ever interrupting. When she paused, he didn't try to fix it. He just nodded, present in her pain. "You're strong," he said at one point. "Stronger than you think." "You don't even know me," she whispered. "I know how much it hurts to feel alone," he said quietly. "And how hard it is to keep showing up anyway." Around 2:30 in the morning, her cousin finally pulled up outside. Emily stood up, surprised that someone had actually come. She turned to Keanu, unsure how to say goodbye to someone who had changed her entire night just by sitting beside her. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "Really?" Keanu smiled. "Anytime. Just remember, the small moments matter." She nodded, fighting tears. "Do you do this often?" "What? Wait with strangers?" He chuckled. "Not really. Only when it feels right." As she walked away toward the exit, she turned back one last time. Keanu was still sitting there in the same quiet posture. Peaceful, unhurried, like a guardian for lost souls who needed someone to wait with them. That night, Emily didn't just find her ride. She found a moment that would stay with her forever. And she would tell the story to many people later, not because she met someone famous, but because, for a few hours, she wasn't invisible. And that ... changed everything. The woman who never forgot a week had passed since that quiet night at the airport, but Emily couldn't let it go. The memory replayed in her head during lunch breaks at the hospital, while folding laundry at home, and even during her quiet walks to the grocery store. Not the part where she met someone famous. It wasn't what stayed with her. It was the feeling, that deep, unexpected comfort of being seen, really seen, when she had felt more invisible than ever. Emily was back in her routine now. 12-hour shifts, fluorescent lights, the beeping of monitors, the soft cries of patients, and the sharp voices of urgency. But something inside her had shifted. She smiled more, listened deeper, and for the first time in a while, she started to believe that maybe she mattered in ways she couldn't yet understand. One rainy afternoon, Emily sat by the window of her small apartment, sipping tea. Her cat, Daisy, curled up in her lap, looked at the notepad she kept by her side. At the top, written in small letters, was a list titled Moments That Mattered. Underneath, she had written just one entry so far. Midnight at the airport, a stranger named Keanu. She hadn't told anyone the full story yet, not even her best friend Sarah. When people asked about her trip, she just said it was emotional. But now, she felt the pull to share it. Not for attention, not for fame, but because stories like that could help people believe in quiet goodness again. She picked up her phone and opened her social media app. With a deep breath, she began typing. Last week I was stranded at the airport after visiting my sick mom. My phone died, my ride didn't show up, and I was scared and alone. Then, someone sat near me. He didn't say much at first, just sat with a peaceful presence that made me feel less invisible. Gave me water, crackers, and when we talked, he listened like no one had in a long time. His name was Keanu. Yes, that Keanu, but he wasn't acting, he wasn't performing. He was just there, kind, humble, human. And for a few hours, I felt like I mattered. I'll never forget it. She stared at the post, hovered her finger over share, paused, and then tapped. The next morning, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Like shares, comments, messages, thousands of them. People weren't just reacting, they were responding, sending their own stories, their own moments of kindness. Strangers from all over the world saying things like, "This gave me hope. Thank you for sharing this. We need more Keanus in the world." And then came the news outlets, one by one, messaging her, asking for interviews. Her story had spread faster than she expected, and now she wasn't sure what to do. Part of her wanted to retreat, crawl back into her quiet world, but another part whispered, This could help. Someone. 2 days later, Emily sat on a local morning news segment wearing her best blue sweater. Her voice trembled slightly at first, but as the host asked her about the story, her confidence grew. "I wasn't looking for anything magical to happen," she said. "I was just hoping someone would care." And he did. Not because of who he was, but because of who he chose to be in that moment. After the interview, she walked outside into the sunlight, her phone in her pocket, her heart full. She didn't expect what came next. As she reached her car, a voice called out gently from behind. "You told the story well." She turned. Standing near the sidewalk, just outside the studio lot, was Keanu. Same quiet presence, same soft smile. Her eyes widened. "How did you—" "Someone sent me the clip." Emily felt her throat tighten. "I didn't mean to make it public. Just felt like the world needed to remember that small things matter." Keanu stepped closer, his tone sincere. "You reminded people that being human is enough. It's not small, it's everything." Emily felt the tears coming, but this time, she let them fall. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You already said it," he replied, "and you said it with honesty." They sat on a nearby bench. It's the same way they had in that airport terminal. No cameras, no noise. Just two people sharing silence like a language. After a while, Emily looked at him. "Why did you come today?" He smiled. "'Cause sometimes people wait with you when you're lost. And sometimes you show up for them when they find their voice." She shook her head gently. "You really are different," he chuckled softly. "Maybe. Or maybe we all have that part in us. We just forget." He sat there a little longer. And then, without a grand goodbye, he stood. "Keep telling the truth, Emily. It matters more than you know." Then he turned and walked away, disappearing down the sidewalk like a whisper in the wind. That night, Emily sat by her window again, Daisy curled up in her lap. She opened her notepad and added a second line under moments that mattered. He came back when it mattered most. The ripple begins Emily's story was no longer just hers. It had become something far bigger than she ever imagined. In the days after Keanu visited her outside the TV studio, her inbox overflowed, not just with curiosity or celebrity obsession, but with pain, gratitude, and deep longing. People from all over the world wrote messages that broke and rebuilt her heart again and again. A single mother in Brazil shared how her son had waited in the rain for her with an umbrella every day for a week because she had been feeling down. An elderly man in Japan sent a photo of a stranger who helped him find his way home when he forgot his address during a moment of confusion. A teenage girl in New York wrote, "I was going to give up, but then I watched your video. If people like him exist, maybe life still has a place for me." Emily read every message, some twice, some more than that. It was overwhelming, yes, but it was also healing. She hadn't realized how many people were just one small act of kindness. Away from believing in the world again, the hospital where she worked started calling her the girl who sat with Keanu. Her coworkers teased her gently, but behind their laughter was admiration, a quiet respect. Her patients seemed to smile, a little more when she entered the room. Some asked if she would write a book. Others just held her hand and thanked her for telling the story, for reminding them that people still cared, but not everyone celebrated it. One afternoon, during a staff meeting in the hospital lounge, her supervisor pulled her aside. "Emily, can we talk privately?" They stepped into her small office. "I've been proud of how you've handled all the attention," the supervisor began, "but the hospital board's a bit concerned." "Concerned?" Emily asked, confused. "There's been some media outside. A few too many interruptions in the ward. They think it might be affecting patient focus." Emily's stomach tightened. "I never meant for any of this to interfere." "I know," her supervisor said kindly, "but maybe it's time to step back a little." Emily nodded, her heart sinking. After that, she avoided interviews. She declined podcast offers, even turned down a small book deal from a local publisher. She didn't want fame, not if it meant losing her patients' trust, not if it meant silencing the quiet moments that mattered most. But something unexpected happened. Next, she received a package in the hospital mailroom. It had no sender's name, just her first name written carefully on the label. Inside was a handwritten letter and a thin silver bracelet. The letter read, "For the times you choose to stay quiet when the world wants noise. This is not for attention, which is for remembrance. When you feel like giving up, it reminded me that truth can be quiet and still move hearts. Think you for that, no signature. Just a small symbol drawn at the bottom, an open eye inside a circle." She didn't recognize it. She slipped the bracelet onto her wrist. It fit perfectly. Later that night, while walking home, she spotted a young man crying on a park bench. Something in his posture reminded her of herself that night in the airport. She hesitated, then approached gently. "Hey," she said softly. "Are you okay?" The boy looked up. He's probably no older than 17. His eyes red, his shoulders tense. "I missed the last bus," he said. "My phone's dead. I live too far to walk." Emily smiled, her voice calm. "I've been there." She sat next to him and offered him her phone to call someone. "Why are you helping me?" he asked, voice cracking. "Because someone once waited with me when I was lost," she said. "And now it's my turn." They sat there under the glow of the street lamp until the boy's brother arrived. As he got into the car, he turned back and whispered, "Thank you." Emily walked home that night, feeling something stirred deep within her, not just gratitude, not just memory, but purpose. A few days later, a local school invited her to speak to their students. She thought about saying no, but something in her heart said yes. When she stood in front of the classroom, rows of eyes watching her, she didn't talk about fame. She didn't talk about movies. She talked about kindness, about being seen, about not walking past someone who looked lost. "You don't have to be famous to change someone's life," she said. "You just have to be present." After the talk, a girl approached her quietly. "Miss Emily," she said, "do you think people like that really exist?" "Yes," Emily said. "I know they do." That night, as Emily walked home past the park bench, she looked up and saw someone standing in the shadows. Near the tree, a tall figure in a dark jacket. Keanu didn't wave. He didn't wave. He just nodded once, a quiet, knowing smile on his face. She nodded back, eyes misty. He turned and walked away, again disappearing down the street, and Emily whispered to herself, "He's still waiting with me, ... even from afar." The bench that changed lives it started with a quiet idea, one Emily hadn't shared with anyone. Oh? It came to her while walking past the same park bench where she had helped the crying boy. Something about that bench, its loneliness, its stillness reminded her of her first night at the airport when everything in her world felt like it was falling apart, and how one person had made all the difference just by sitting beside her. So, she bought a small notebook from the bookstore near her apartment. Then, on a quiet Saturday morning, she placed it in a clear, weatherproof box and left it on the bench with a small wooden sign. The sign read, "If you're lost, write it down. If you're found, write that too." Beneath the message, she had added the words, "Someone once waited with me. Now I wait with you." She didn't tell anyone it was her. She didn't post about it. She didn't even check it the first 2 days. On the third morning, she passed by and noticed the box was open. Someone had written something on the first page. "My mom doesn't talk to me anymore. I don't know why, but it hurts. This is the only place I could say it. Thank you." Below it, another line had been added. "I was just passing by and read your words. I don't know who you are, but I care. Whoever you are, keep going." Emily stood there for a long time, the breeze gently brushing her hair as she read. The growing list of entries. Stories of heartbreak, loneliness, confusion, but also encouragement, strength, and healing. People didn't sign names. They didn't seek attention. They just shared, quietly, honestly. And the notebook became something more than paper. It became a shared heartbeat. Days passed, then weeks. Every time she walked by, there were new words, new voices, new reminders that no one is ever truly alone. One day, while rereading the pages, she noticed something that made her chest tighten, a message in clean handwriting. "To the one who sat in silence and listened, thank you. You reminded me that presence is more powerful than noise." And underneath, simply, K.R. Her hands trembled. She didn't need to guess. Keanu had been there again. This time, She smiled through her tears. But not everyone liked what was happening, eh? Man from the neighborhood association confronted her one afternoon. He had found out she was the one behind the notebook. This is not a place for people to pour out drama, he said. We're trying to keep the park clean, respectable. What about keeping it human? She asked gently. He scoffed. Go. Write a blog or something. This isn't therapy. She wanted to yell, to argue, but she didn't. Instead, she went back home, opened a fresh notebook, and placed it on the bench again that evening. But the next morning it was gone. The box, the notebook, the sign. All taken. Her heart sank. Like someone had erased not just her effort, but the hundreds of quiet voices that had trusted that space. She sat on the bench that morning, empty hands on her lap. The air felt colder, but as she sat, a young girl approached her, maybe 15. Dark hoodie, nervous eyes. Are you the one who put the notebook here? She asked. Emily nodded slowly. I came back to write something today, the girl said. It helped me last week. I was really close to doing something stupid, but writing helped. And then someone else answered me, and I felt less alone. Hello. Looked at her, tears already forming. It's gone, Emily said softly. Someone took it. The girl pulled a folded paper from her pocket. Then maybe. We need more benches, she said. And that moment lit something inside Emily. Later that week, she created a small website. She called it The Quiet Bench. It had no ads, no fancy graphics, just a space where people could post short, anonymous messages, lost or found, and others could respond with kindness. In just 4 days, hundreds of entries flooded in. People thanking her, people opening up, people responding with love. But the most unexpected thing came in the mail. A small wooden bench sent to her doorstep. It wasn't large, but it was beautifully crafted. On the seat, carved carefully, were the words, "Someone once waited with me. Now I wait with you." There was no note, no signature, just a small engraving on the underside. She placed the bench in the park, this time with city permission. And this time, no one dared remove it. The community started embracing it. Neighbors painted it gently. Kids tied ribbons around it. Local musicians even played quietly beside it on weekends. It became more than a bench. It became a promise won. Evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, casting golden light across the wood, Emily sat quietly, watching people pass by. Some sat, some read. Some left folded notes, and then she saw him. Keanu, he sat beside her without a word. It's like old friends who didn't need explanations. After a while, he whispered, "This is yours." "No," she said, looking at the bench. "This is everyone's." He nodded. "You took a moment and turned it into a movement." "Only because you waited with me," she said. "And now," he said gently, "you wait with the world." They sat together as the evening breeze danced through the leaves. No need for cameras, no need for fame. Just two people, two souls. And a bench that reminded everyone that kindness, when shared, never stays small. The day the world showed up, Apatam arrived like a soft breath over the city, painting the trees with strokes of amber, gold, and faded orange. Emily had grown used to walking past the quiet bench each morning, often pausing to touch its smooth wood, feeling the comfort it had given so many. The messages left beneath the seat in folded papers were now collected every weekend and placed in a second notebook, a new one, just for keeps. The stories inside it grew longer, braver, more raw. It had become a diary of the unheard, and still, she kept her promise. She didn't make it about herself, never posted selfies, never claimed ownership. If people found out who she was, they found out through whispers. It's not headlines, but something unexpected happened in November. A viral post began to spread this time, not written by her. It was from a teenager who had found the bench while running. "Away from home, the night I sat there, I was planning to disappear. But someone left a message tucked behind the bench that said, 'You matter, even when you don't believe it.' I don't know who wrote it, but it saved me." That single post was shared over 1 million times. People across the world began talking about the quiet bench. News stations picked it up. Influencers made videos. Teachers started talking about it in classrooms. One university in Canada placed a replica bench on its campus with the same words engraved. Even a group of school children from India sent her drawings in the mail, each one showing someone sitting beside another, with speech bubbles saying, "I'm here for." You and Emily was overwhelmed, and part of her wanted to run from it all. But then something shifted again. Something deeper. The city mayor reached out. He invited her to speak at a community peace event. At first, she said no. But then she remembered the young girl in the hoodie, the man in the rain, her own broken heart that night at the airport. She thought about all the people who never got a chance to be heard, so she said yes. The event was held in a city park, just a few blocks from the original bench. Chairs were placed on the grass. A small stage was set with flowers and lights. Hundreds of people came, many of them strangers, and yet something about them felt familiar. They had all come to say the same thing: kindness still matters. Emily stepped onto the stage, heart pounding, palms sweating. But as she looked at the sea of faces, old young parents with babies, teenagers with notebooks, elders in wheelchairs, something in her steadied. She began to speak. "This story isn't about me," she said gently. It started with a moment. One moment at an airport, when someone chose to sit beside me instead of walking past. She took a breath. "His name is Keanu. You probably know who he is. But the reason he changed my life had nothing to do with fame. He helped me when no one else did. Not with money, not with advice. Just by being there." She paused, eyes misty. "And that night taught me something important. Sometimes the biggest thing you can do for someone is simply not let them feel invisible." The crowd was silent, still connected. She looked toward the edge of the crowd and saw him, Keanu, standing back, hood up, arms crossed, just watching. No cameras, no spotlight, just a quiet witness. Emily continued, "I never meant for this to become big. I just wanted people to have a place to be heard. And now, you've all made it into something I never could have done alone." People began clapping, not loud and wild, but warm, full of respect. As the sun set, something magical happened. Person after person walked up to the bench. Now placed at the center of the event, hand tied small ribbons around its arms. Some red, some white, some blue, some yellow. Each color represented something different: grief, love, hope. An old man placed a photo of his late wife on the bench, then wiped a tear and whispered, "Thank you for giving me a place." To remember her, a child placed a small rock, painted with the words, "You are not alone." A nurse handed Emily a folded letter. "I was the one who left that first message in the notebook," she said, her voice cracking. Emily hugged her, and then, at the very end, Keanu approached. He didn't take the stage, didn't grab a mic, simply walked up to the bench, placed a tiny paper crane on the wood, and whispered something only Emily could hear. "You took a single seat and turned it into a sanctuary." She looked at him, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. "You started it," she said. He shook his head. "No, you carried it." The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't swarm him. They just watched quietly, honoring the sacredness of that moment. And as the evening faded into night, and lanterns were lit around the bench, Emily finally understood something. This wasn't about a bench, or a story, or even about Keanu. It was about the small choice to sit beside someone, to stay, to care. And those small choices, multiplied by thousands, had started a quiet revolution. Not loud, not flashy, but powerful. Where the light stays winter had settled in gently, wrapping the city in pale skies and quiet streets. The leaves had fallen, but the bench still stood, wrapped in ribbons and layered with folded messages. Even after the public event weeks earlier, people kept coming. In snow, in rain, in the soft stillness of early morning. Not because it was famous, but because it had become something sacred. Emily's life had changed completely, but not in the ways people might expect. She wasn't living in a mansion. She wasn't signing autographs. She was still a nurse, still working night shifts, still catching the bus some mornings with her hair barely tied back. But her heart had changed. Every patient she cared for now reminded her of the ones who wrote into that first notebook. People carrying silent pain, people waiting to be seen. She listened better now. She stayed longer at their bedside. She offered presence more than advice. And outside the hospital walls, something beautiful had begun to spread. A movement called the Quiet. Bench Project was started by a group of volunteers who had been touched by Emily's story. People began placing their own benches in parks, schools, train stations, even prisons. Not all of them were fancy. Some were made from scrap wood. Others were painted bright colors, but each had the same message carved, painted, or written somewhere. Someone once waited with me. Now I wait with you soon. People started mailing Emily photos. A bench in a refugee shelter in Greece. A bench at a school for children with autism in New Zealand. A bench on a rooftop garden in Japan. The message was traveling without her ever. Needing to speak it again, but not everything was easy. One cold morning, Emily received a letter with no return address. Inside was a photo of a burned bench, charred wood and ash dot. The note read, "Some people hate kindness." Emily's hands trembled as she held the paper. She sat down, heart heavy. For the first time in months, she felt doubt. Like maybe this had all been too hopeful, too fragile. Later that night, she walked to the original bench in her neighborhood park. She sat alone, snowflakes falling in slow spirals around her. And then, someone sat beside her. Not a stranger. Keanu again. No words at first. Just presence. After a while, he looked at her gently. "You okay?" She shook her head. "Someone burned one. In another country, maybe more." He nodded slowly. "Kindness threatens people who are used to being untouched." "What if it all fades?" she whispered. "What if it disappears one day? What if people stop believing?" Keanu looked forward into the falling snow. "It won't," he said softly. "Because it's not about benches or names. About us anymore." He turned to her, voice steady and calm. "It's about what happens inside people the moment they feel seen. Once someone feels that they carry it, they share it. Even if the bench burns, the memory stays." She nodded, the cold mixing with the warmth in her chest. And then, like always, he stood. "What now?" she asked. He smiled. "Keep waiting with people." And just like that, he walked off again, disappearing into the night like snow melting. Into shadow. But something inside her remained burning. 3 months later, the Quiet Bench Foundation was formed. It was built entirely from donations, mostly small. People gave what they could. It wasn't about profit. It was about planting hope. The foundation sent out kits. 1 wooden bench panel, a notebook, a protective box, and instructions to create a space of listening. Emily didn't run it alone. She built a team of counselors, teachers, artists, and people who had once sat alone and been changed. They started visiting communities in silence. Not with lectures, not with noise. Just by sitting, waiting, and listening. And one day, while visiting a school in a quiet town, Emily sat beside a bench painted by the students. A little girl with bright eyes and trembling hands came to her. Holding a wrinkled note, "Miss Emily," she said, "I wrote something. It's not very good." Emily smiled. "Can I read it?" The girl nodded. The paper read, "I waited here because I was scared to go home. Someone came and said nothing, just sat with me. And now, I feel brave." Emily folded the paper gently and placed it in her coat pocket. "You're already brave," she said softly. The girl beamed, and later that night, as Emily packed her bag to leave, she saw a message carved under the new bench, smaller than the rest. K.R. was here. No one had seen him. No one had spoken of it, but he had. Come again, always quiet, always watching. Not as a star, not as a savior, just as someone who believed that sitting with the broken could change the world. And Emily finally understood. The world didn't need noise to heal. It needed silence with meaning. It needed waiting without judgment. It needed kindness without condition. And in every quiet bench, in every folded note, in every soft nod from a stranger across the room, so that healing would continue forever.